We're gonna get started. I'm gonna fold my blanket, and essentially what you're gonna need for class today are blocks, some wall space, a strap. You're gonna want some blankets, not only to sit on, but you'll also want some that we can essentially fold up and stack, kind of like a bolster. So that's what you're gonna need, the whole gamut. Blocks, blankets, something that mimics a bolster, and a strap. We're gonna start sitting, and let's see. So we're gonna start in a seated posture called Siddhasana. I'm gonna show you how to come into that, and some of you may feel comfortable practicing that. Some of you might decide that you'll practice that another day. So when in doubt, you can just simply sit with the legs crossed. For Siddhasana, I actually have a little bit more of a rotation of my shin down to the floor. So to come into this, I have my knee bent, starting with the foot flat on the floor. I'm gonna underhook the ankle, and as I point my toes, I can actually turn that top of the shin down to the floor. I'm wanting my heel to line up with my pubic bone. Now the other aspect, just to remove unnecessary pressure from the knee joint, is that we want the shin to be in touch with the floor. Usually if that knee or that shin is lifted, there's an overextension that happens in the front of the ankle. If you notice that your knee is lifted, that your shin is lifted in this position, we want to just simply sit up higher. So you'll need more to sit on. So again, I have my heel in line with the pubic bone, shin comes to the floor. Then I'm doing the same thing with the other leg, pointing the toes, turning the top of the shin down to the floor. In the more traditional pose, the feet do lace together, but this is a great position to start with, is heels in line with the pubic bone, sitting up nice and tall. This pose is called Siddhasana. So I'll switch and show the other side in case you were just watching and you want to join along. So I have my knees bent, feet flat on the floor. I'm underhooking my right ankle, turning the top of the shin down to the floor. You can take a moment, lean over on that right leg. Essentially, it requires that inner groin to open up when sitting upright. Then underhooking the left leg, pointing the toes, turning that top of the shin down to the floor. You will start to feel like your weight is kind of shifting forward onto the shins, especially if you're sitting up quite tall. So as you take a nice deep inhale and exhale, regardless of which seated posture you're in, start to shift your weight back to the hips. And as you take a smooth, steady inhale, a smooth, steady exhale, try to lift the chest from that weight in the hips. As you allow your eyes and face to soften, use your breath to really tune into your body. So as you inhale and exhale, notice how the air starts to flow over your upper lip, down the back of the throat, and into the lungs. Notice how the lungs expand and contract. And as you feel that expansion and contraction, observe what is happening to the rib cage as an effect of that. Breathe so deeply and fully that you start to feel the sides of the rib cage expand just as much as the front of the chest. See if you can even start to open and breathe into the back of the rib cage, the upper back of the body. On your next inhale, bring your hands together in Namaskar. As the palms rest against each other, you'll feel the base of your wrists resting at the base of the rib cage, and the thumb stretches up towards the sternum. With the elbows lifted slightly, use that gentle pressure in the palms to roll the shoulders onto the back of the body. So breathing fully, breathing deeply, observing your body as an entire unit. See if you can even feel the space around your body. Start class today by chanting 3 ohms together as a group. You're welcome to join me or just sit back and listen. We'll start with an inhale. Let go of any tension in the face or the eyes that might have risen. Keeping the chest lifting, shoulders rolling back. At the end of your next exhale, bring your chin down to the chest, surrendering the head to the heart, intellect to intuition. And then release the hands to the thighs. Slowly lift your head and open the eyes. Notice which leg is closest to you, and we'll switch the cross of the legs. So I had my right leg closer to me. I'm going to underhook my left leg, turning the shin to the floor, underhooking the right leg, shin to the floor. In Siddhasana, heels are in line with the pubic bone, sitting up tall. We're going to practice Parvatasana, little mountain pose. So to come into this, we can do this together. You'll lace your fingers, press the palms away from you. And instead of pressing out through the knuckles of the fingers so intensely, see if you can keep the palms flat to the wall in front of you, really extending through the heel of the palm or that area in the palm that's closer to your wrist. With the arms straight, take the arms up and overhead. So take a smooth, steady inhale and exhale. Notice if your weight is shifting forward, or if you can actually, again, shift your weight back over your hips, over your pelvis. And as you use that weight to sink down to really create an anchor to the lift of your spine, take a nice deep inhale, deep exhale, and soften the face. As we anchor the weight into the hips, we have something to lift from, something to stretch from, to create length with. So notice that there's these complementary actions of, yes, lifting up, sitting up tall, getting lift in the side waist and the front of the armpit. But we also want to have a bit of an anchor that we can rest our weight into and feel a nice rising up sensation from. And then bring the hands down. Notice which pinky is on the loose end. We'll switch the grasp of the fingers. Pressing the palms out in front of you. If you ever feel any pinching or pain, you don't have to take the arms up and overhead. But if you feel a stretch, or if you feel, almost an achy stretch, then that's okay. That's something that we actually want. That achy stretching sensation is usually a buildup of fascia between the muscles and bones. It is similar to a small layer of cartilage that builds up every day. So when we move and there's fascia there, that's when we get that real deep achy stretch. We want to break that fascia up. Otherwise, it just keeps layering on, layering on. So you inhale and exhale. And soften the face and the eyes. The front of the armpits are lifting, the side waists are lifting. But try to soften the tops of the shoulders. Not only is there a softening in the tops of the shoulders, but there's a little bit of an active pull of the shoulders away from the ears. And then bring the hands down, sitting up nice and tall. You can go ahead and uncross the legs, clear your mat off. And what you're gonna need is some space at the wall. We're going to use the wall to support our legs in Parsvottanasana. I'll demonstrate just really quickly. So not only am I able to bring my hands to the wall, but more specifically, today we're going to practice putting our toes up the wall. I have my front foot's toes are lifted, and then I can baby step my back foot away from me. This is really focusing on stretching the calf, stretching that back of the ankle. And then while I'm at the wall, I can actually lean forward onto my forearms. I don't think you guys can see that high in this. I'll have to tilt this up. But essentially, we're going to lean forward onto the forearms here, take a few breaths, and then we can twist. And this is a great posture for any low back pain, any really tension in the back at all, but specifically low back pain. And so we have our legs in Parsvottanasana, front toes up the wall, and then we twist. And then coming back to center. To come out off of this, I'm turning my toes off to the side, and then I can heel toe step the feet together. That's about the most stable way that you can come out of this. If you don't have any wall space, you can always use a block to place the toes up on and come up into a position like this. So you can decide which support you're practicing with today. Let's go ahead and start doing this together. You'll take your right foot forward first. And you can baby toe step or slide the left foot back behind you. And as you take a few breaths here, try to keep that lift in the side waist, that openness in the chest, and you can even lean forward, taking your forearms to the wall. Every inhale and every exhale, just to observe what's happening in the legs and the feet, what areas might be more tense than others. And as you press into your inner heel and outer heel evenly, think about turning your inner thighs back to the wall behind you. So if your legs were rolling pins, they would both be rolling in towards the midline of your body. They would both be rolling towards each other with those inner thighs, inner knees, inner ankles, turning back to the wall behind you. Now we're going to move into our twist. So anchoring that left forearm or hand to the wall, right hand to your hip, turning the rib cage. Notice if you lost any grounding, any anchoring in the legs. And when I say that, I mean start to observe what's happening in the feet, what's happening in the hips. Often when we twist, we might just fall into the hips. And so either that right hip is going to shift out to the side, or that left hip you're turning away from starts to slouch forward. Instead, see if you can press the left thigh back. Turn the inner right thigh towards the wall behind you and stand up nice and tall. So we're still creating that length in the body as we twist. And then coming back to center, you can turn the toes off the wall, off to the sides, and then heel toe step the feet together, and we'll do the other side. So left foot forward, left toes up the wall or on some support, and then you can step your right foot back. In the traditional posture of Parsvottanasana, the inner foot on the front leg draws a line and bisects the arch on the back foot. The feet are about 3.5 feet apart. For today, go ahead and have both the toes pointing straight forward. So you really just have to adjust that back foot. So the inner foot on the back leg is a nice straight line that's perpendicular to the wall. This will increase that calf stretch. It also gives you a sense of what weight is resting on the inner heel and what weight is resting on the outer heel. So take a nice deep inhale and exhale. Press the thighs back as you lift the chest up. So we're overall creating some nice length in the side waists. And then keeping that right forearm or hand at the wall, take your left hand to your hip or to your low back and start to twist. So take a few breaths here. Notice if you lost any of that anchoring in the legs. Pressing evenly between the inner and outer heel, turning the inner thighs back, And as you press the thighs away from you, lift the chest up tall. As you exhale, soften the abdomen. See if you can twist a little bit deeper. Taking the right ribs forward, left ribs back. And then coming back to center. You can turn your toes off to the right. Heel toe step the feet together. And we'll do each side one more time. So you can start with your left foot back a little bit farther. Right toes come up the wall. Inner edges of the feet are in line with each other, so both the toes are pointing forward. And you can lean forward. If you're feeling quite stiff, the wall is very nice support. If you're feeling a little bit more mobile or you're wanting a deeper stretch, then that's where you can use the block under the toes and maybe bring your hands either down to the floor or to another set of blocks. As you press evenly between the inner heel and outer heel, turn the inner thighs back, press the thighs away from you and lift the chest up. Left arm stays at the wall, right hand comes to the hip or the low back, and we twist. Taking a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale. Try to straighten the legs completely. So even though you're twisting off to the right, can you press the left thigh away from you? Now the breaths have to move into the collarbones since the abdomen is wringing out like a wet rag when we twist. So see if you can spread across the chest, draw the shoulders back. If you feel comfortable doing so, you can take your head and look over the right shoulder. And then coming back towards the wall. Turn the toes off to the left, heel toe step the feet together. Last side, last time. Stepping the right foot back, left toes up the wall. Leaning forward. That's where you're gonna get more of the stretch in the calf, in the thigh, or the hamstring specifically. As you turn your inner thighs back, see if you can notice which hip is farther forward or farther back, or if they are indeed in a neutral place. And often if there's tension in the hips, what you're going to notice is that that hip connected to the front foot pulls forward towards the wall a little bit more easily than that back hip, the hip that's connected to the back leg. Now we can, there's a term that I've heard teachers use where they say like square the hips off, right? So that the hips are facing forward. But rather than working from the hips, work from the legs. So press into your heels, turn your inner thighs back to the wall behind you. And as you lift the chest up, try to press that front thigh, that left thigh away from you to pull that left hip back. It's almost as if you're hooking that outer left hip towards the wall behind you. But still that right thigh has to also press back away from you. So there's a little bit of balance and harmony that we have to tune into. And it really comes from the work of the legs that the hips begin to essentially come to a more neutral position in relationship to the spine. And moving into the twist, right arm stays at the wall, left hand comes back behind you, either on your hip or your low back, and we twist. Taking a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale. Notice if the shoulders are rolling towards the front of the chest, and see if you can start to move them to the back of the body. As you press into the heels and press the thighs away from you, lift the chest, lift the side waist up, and then turn your head to look over the left shoulder. Open the left shoulder up as you look. And then coming back to center, turning the toes off to the side, heel toe step the feet together, and stand in Tadasana. Now let's go ahead and move into Adho Mukha Svanasana. So if you know the distance of your feet from your hands, then you can just take your hands forward and step the feet back. General rule of thumb is that if you were to start in a tabletop position, the wrists are slightly forward from the shoulders. Knees are slightly back from the hips. So that's our initial measurement for downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Point your index finger forward, spread the fingers wide, and curl your toes under, lift the hips up if you haven't already. So take a few breaths here. Go ahead and lift your heels off the floor. Lift your hips towards the ceiling. Take a nice deep inhale and exhale, and as you press your hands down, lift the sideways. Try and lift the hips up. The lift in the hips comes not only from the work of the hands pressing down and lifting the sideways, but notice how you can also lift from your heels. You can also lift from the legs, lifting the hips up. So there's two ways that we can start to get the lift of the hips. Now, as you take an exhale, try and pump your heels to the floor. So we're gonna, when I say pump your heels, I mean lift the heels up and down. And as you lift the heels up and down, we're stretching that calf, we're stretching that Achilles tendon. So I'm not concerned about your heels touching the floor, but I want you to move them up and down. And then as you take an exhale, keep them down. Try and press the heels all the way to the floor, chest moves to the floor, head to the floor. Smooth, deep inhales, deep exhales. And then you can come down to rest, either in that tabletop position or Adho Mukha Virasana, where the knees are wide, toes point back, and the inner edges of the toes touch and come together. And then we lean forward. Adho Mukha Virasana, downward facing hero's pose. Now we're gonna do one more time. This time as we practice, we're gonna add a little bit more of a technique to the workings. So I had mentioned in the last pose we practiced, turning the inner thighs back, kind of like they're rolling pins. Now, just as the legs turn back and the inner thighs turn back, it's very interesting because the inner arms turn forward. And so you can kind of think like that there's this pulling in opposite directions from the middle of the body and the very center line of the body. If you were to pull a string from your belly button back to the wall behind you between your legs, that's the direction it's headed. But if you were to pull a string from your belly button between the arms moving forward, that's where the inner arms are moving. And so we want to integrate those actions and kind of that whole body awareness as we practice Adho Mukha Svanasana. So let's do again. Hands slightly forward from the shoulders, knees slightly back from the hips, curl your toes under, lift your hips up. Now you can bend your knees, and with your feet a little bit wider than hip width apart, bend the knees and squeeze the thighs together. As you bend the knees, squeeze the thighs together, you're really encouraging that turn of the inner thighs back to the wall behind you. Try and keep that squeeze of the thighs as you straighten the legs. And I'm not worried about the heels, but you're squeezing the thighs together with the feet wider than the hips, and then try to straighten the legs as you keep that gentle squeeze of the thighs. Now, as you bend the elbows slightly, turn your inner arms forward to the wall behind you, or to the wall in front of you. Outer arms turn down to the floor. So you're gonna notice that the point of your elbow moves to the floor. The pit of your elbow, which you can see, actually moves to the wall in front of you. It becomes more in line with your hands. Now let the head hang. Think about what's happening in the body as you do this. Squeeze the thighs together, lift the hips up, turn the inner arms forward, and as you press the hands down, try to lift your hips up towards the ceiling. Eventually the heels start to come to the floor, but you're still squeezing the thighs. You're still turning the inner arms towards the wall in front of you. And let the head hang. Some of you can even reach the head to the floor, reach the chest to the floor. And then come down to rest. Knees wide, toes together, sitting back on the heels, letting the arms and the head rest. Very nice. So now we're going to come into Uttanasana. You can take your hands forward, curl the toes under behind you. This is a short downward dog, kind of. We want to keep that squeeze of the thighs in, lift of the hips up. You're going to start to walk your hands towards your feet. Now, a couple of things might start to shift. Number one, if the low back or if the spine is not able to keep it straight and keep its lift, the low back is going to round up towards the ceiling. The second thing that happens is that the hamstrings get very tight. And so what happens is the knees bend when the hamstrings are very tight, and I ask you to come into this forward bend position. If you notice that your back is rounding and the knees and the thighs are becoming tight in the hamstrings, go ahead and grab some blocks to place your hands on. Now we do have a little bit of a wider frame here for Uttanasana. Have your wrists under your shoulders, heels under the hips. As you take a few breaths here, try to get that squeeze of the thighs towards each other. You can bend your knees. And with the knees bent, heels a little bit wider than the hips, try and squeeze the thighs together. And then observe your feet. Just for a moment, lift your toes off the floor. Think about these 4 points: the big toe ball mount, pinky toe ball mount, inner heel and outer heel. And as you squeeze the thighs together, what changes? Notice how usually our weight, it will drop on that inner foot. Usually the big toe ball mount, the inner heel get quite heavy. So keeping the knees squeezing in, thighs squeezing in, see if you can press into the pinky toe ball mount, press into that outer heel a little bit more. As you take a few breaths, try to keep that squeezing of the thigh sensation, that pinching of the knees sensation as you straighten the legs. As you take a few breaths here, you're focusing on how the weight is resting on the 4 points of your feet. How can you maintain that squeeze of the thighs? And as you press your thighs back to the wall behind you, lift the chest. Just like those inner thighs turn towards the wall behind you, the chest is lifting forward away from the thighs. So here we have that nice length. Now, even if your spine is lifted and the legs are working here, notice what's happening to the shoulders. Is there any way that you can get the chest a little bit broader? As you start to spread from the very center of your chest across the collarbones and out to the shoulders. Notice how that front of the armpit starts to open up. Now, if you feel like you might be able to lower your hands down a little bit, maybe you're getting a little bit more mobility, feeling a little bit more of a stretch, see if you can start to lower your hands, either down on the blocks or down to the floor. Some of you might be even using more support than what the blocks provide, like a chair. Taking a few breaths here. And then no matter what support you're using underneath your hands, see if you can walk your hands to the outsides of your ankles. Let the head hang. So now that we have the head hanging, the spine is going to round a little bit. That's okay. You can even round the upper back. Even though we're not pulling the shoulders to the back of the body, we still want space between the ears and the shoulders. So we're not just completely dropping the shoulders, even though we're letting the upper back round. And then you can walk the hands forward. We call this a concave back position. So we went into the more traditional Uttanasana when the head hangs, but as you walk the hands forward and make the spine straight again, a little bit more of a traditional concave back, Uttanasana, intense stretch pose. Now you're gonna walk your hands forward, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Keep the legs straight. It's okay if the heels lift up off the floor. Adho Mukha Svanasana. Practice with whatever points you're taking away from today. Whatever points and instructions are standing out to you. And then come down to rest. Knees wide, toes together, sitting back on the heels. And then you'll press yourself up to sit. So I know I'm saying a lot of things, and I don't expect everyone to remember everything. I really have been taught with Iyengar yoga that the truth is your students aren't taking away what you're trying to teach. They're taking away their own thing. You're going to need some blankets to sit on, and we're going to take the legs wide. So when I give all of these points, I'm not expecting you to take all of them and listen to every single one of them, but I do believe that there might be one or two that are going to stand out to you a little bit more than others, and that's what you should run with. Whatever is really sticking out to you and hitting home, and essentially you're walking away with that key point in your mind, and that's what I want you to integrate throughout class. The rest is really just, you know, details on form and potentially safety, or, you know, managing pain and overstretching and tendons and ligaments. That's usually where a lot of these points are coming from, is to avoid overstretching in certain areas and amplify proper stretching in other, in very specific places. So we're going to take the legs wide in Upavista Konasana, expanded angle pose. So you sit with the legs wide, take a few breaths, sitting up nice and tall. When it comes to Upavista Konasana, the feet are slightly flexed and the legs are working to be straight. However, what often will happen is that the back of the knee will move towards the floor a little bit faster than the thigh. And especially for sitting up tall, that's where it's easy to get that pressure in the back of the knee. So the whole arm starts to almost slope down, or the whole leg starts to almost slope down to the floor. So as you flex your foot and you press into your heels, just for a moment, try and lift your knees off the floor. And as you lift your knees off the floor, take your hand, and as you open up your thumb and your index finger, you kind of have this L space. Place that on your thigh near your knee. Remember, knees are lifting off the floor, heels are pressing down. You're gonna track up your thigh, and as you get to the top of your thigh, you're gonna notice this crease, this pit of the thigh, as it's referenced in Iyengar yoga. And as you press that pit of the thigh down, lift the chest up. And this is where we want the depth. This is where we want the work. This is really where we want the weight in our hips to affect our pose, is within the depth of that pit of the thigh. So you can start to straighten the legs, but as you straighten the legs, keep that pressure of the heels, keep that pressure of your sit bones down. And what you're going to feel is the legs are working a little bit more. I can muscularly see the difference between someone working to press the heel down and someone not. Not only does the knee move a little bit faster to the floor, but this whole muscle above the knee is actually visually changes. So you can start to look at this in yourself, pressing the heels down, lifting the knee slightly off the floor. Really keep that pressure as you straighten the leg. Notice that muscle. You can even put your hand on it and then see if you can let go. What happens when you stop pressing the legs down? What happens when you let the legs go limp? Notice not only the feeling of the muscle, but you can visually see it. And so then again, pressing the heel down, lifting the knee up, sitting up nice and tall, reach your arms up and overhead for Urdhva Hastasana, upward hands. Taking a deep inhale, a deep exhale. And then on your exhale, twist off to the left. Keeping that pressure of the heels, slight lift of the knees. I had mentioned the 4 points of the feet in another pose, and we can still use that area to focus our attention on and get some feedback in what's happening in the legs. So you press evenly into those 4 points of the feet. Just notice and observe what habits your feet might have. Then reaching the arms up and overhead, back to center. On an exhale, twisting off to the right. Pressing the heels down, lifting the knees up. Eyes soft, face soft. And then back to center, reaching the arms up and overhead. Bringing the hands down. Now, some of you might feel that the knees and thighs are tired, or maybe even the hips. So we can come into rest in Baddha Konasana. So you can just swing the leg in. I am hooking underneath my knee near my thigh, swinging that foot in towards the midline. If your knee is tender or has tension, you're going to start by lifting the knee straight up to the ceiling, using your hand to soften those tendons and ligaments in the back of the knee. And you can scoot the heel in close to your body, and then keeping that heel close, take the knee off to the side. So those are the two ways to come into Baddha Konasana, depending on how your knee is feeling today. Bound angle pose, as the feet come together, knees are wide, lift the chest up, press your knees to the floor. Now we're going to come back into Upavista Konasana. So you can take the knees up, stretch the legs off to the side. This time we're practicing Parivrita. So I'll just demonstrate really quickly. The first posture is I'm leaning on my thigh with my forearm, reaching the arm off to the side. We'll do each side. And then some of you guys will be ready to move a little bit deeper. Perhaps you're stretching the arm farther down the leg or shifting the arm to the floor. I'm keeping my forearm parallel to the leg in this position here, maybe even grasping the foot if we get to that point. And Parivrita Upavista Konasana, reaching the arm up and overhead, maybe grabbing the foot, maybe not. And then when we come up, we keep the arms wide so we can get that boost and lift in the chest. And then I'll demonstrate to the other side. You can either have that forearm on the thigh or elbow to the floor, forearm parallel to the thigh, reaching up and overhead. Some will be ready to grasp the foot, and some might not. Not in a rush today, you have options. And then coming back up to sit. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and let's start leaning off to the left. Left forearm to the left thigh. Notice what's already happening in the legs. As you press the heels down, lift the chest up. Not only is that lift in the chest coming from the thighs, pressing down onto the floor, but notice as you press into your left forearm, you can start to roll the shoulder back. And then reach the right arm up and overhead. So we're not touching the foot now. We're not going to our deepest deep. We're just getting a little bit warmed up, stretching that right side of the side waist. As you exhale, draw the belly in towards the spine, way back into the hips. And then coming back up to sit, right forearm comes to the right thigh, reaching the left arm up and overhead. Pressing the heels down, keeping that lift of the knees as you press out through the big toe ball mount, inner heel, weighing back. Notice if your weight is coming forward or if you can sit back. And then coming back up, moving off to the left, you can keep the forearm on your left thigh, or some of you are ready to take that forearm to the floor and reach the right arm up and overhead. Now this is really important to sit back, weigh heavy into that left hip. As you take a few breaths here, think about turning your rib cage up towards the ceiling. Not concerned about where the hands are and if they're grasping the foot, but I want you to feel is length, is lift in the side waists. Even though we're twisting, we're not compressing into the thigh, we're still creating a rising, a lifting up, an opening sensation in the body. And then coming up to sit, moving off to the right. You're either having that right forearm on the thigh, maybe dropping it to the floor. Way back, way heavy into that right hip. As you press the heels down, stretch the heels away from you. Notice as you reach the left fingertips away, pressing the left foot away, that whole left side of the body gets very, very long. Turn the rib cage up to the ceiling. And then coming up to sit, sitting up nice and tall. Back to Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. So you're either hooking underneath the knee, swinging the legs in, or taking your time, having the knee up towards the ceiling, and then heel comes to the pelvis, and then knee goes out to the side while already bent. And the reason why that's helpful for the knee is because if you're just swinging the leg in and the hip isn't mobile, now your knee is taking a lot of that mobility, and that's where we get pain and tension. But if we lift the knee up, this is a neutral position for the knee. And so now we're creating a bind in the knee while the hip is in a neutral position, so that's not causing extra pain on the knee. And now as I take my leg off to the side, guess what has to become mobile? Now because I've created this stability in my knee, my hip has to become a little bit more mobile. So it's really helpful to come in that sense if you notice that your knees or ankles are taking more of the twist and the sensation than the hips are. This is meant to be a hip opener. That's where you should be feeling it. And now with the feet together, knees wide, go ahead and walk the hands forward. Baddha Konasana. So nice leaning forward, try and press your thighs, try and press your knees to the floor. If your knees are tender, keep your big toe ball mounts together. But if not, then you can let the feet splay. As you take a few breaths here, you'll walk the hands forward as far as you feel comfortable, as far as you feel able today. And then you can walk the hands back towards yourself, sit up nice and tall. Now we're going to practice a seated twist. Go ahead and have your strap nearby. I'm going to grab mine. We're going to practice Marichyasana 1 and Marichyasana 3. So let's start by taking the legs forward in staff pose. This is Dandasana, staff pose. So you sit up nice and tall. You shouldn't feel any achiness or tension in the low back. And if you do, grab some more support to sit on. You should feel as though you can lift the chest up and roll the shoulders back, sitting nice and tall in Dandasana. Now I'm going to demonstrate and then we'll do together. I'm going to start by taking my right foot in, knee is bent straight up to the ceiling. I'm going to use my strap around that straight leg. So the strap comes around the toe ball mounts. Place that strap into my right hand. So now I'm twisting away from my bent knee. My left hand is just coming to my low back. Palm is open against the sacrum, triangular bone at the base of the spine. And as I sit up nice and tall, I'm thinking about turning my rib cage off to the side. Often what happens is that knee that's bent likes to splay out. So we have to be mindful of how our weight is resting on the 4 points of the feet. And then we're going to come back to center. Some of you will prefer to sit here in this closed twist, twisting now towards the bent knee. You can hold on to that strap. Or if you're feeling like you've done this before or are comfortable, we're going to actually hook the elbow to the outside of that thigh. I'm still trying to sit up nice and tall as I do this, and I am using my right hand behind me for support. So this is Marichyasana 3. Marichyasana 1 was that open twist. That's what we're up to today and what we're practicing. And then straightening the leg back to Dandasana and doing the other side. So a strap is not necessary, but it is nice resistance. So let's do together. Bending the left knee in. You'll bring that heel as close to your hips as long as your knee is comfortable and the foot is flat on the floor. Then strap goes around the right toe ball mounts. You can walk your hand down the strap. So you start to twist off to the right, take a few breaths. We want the shoulders to be rolling back on the spine. So this is where the strap is handy. You can actually slide your hand up the strap to keep the chest broad. And as you press into your left foot, notice where your pressure is on the 4 points of the feet and lift the chest up tall. You can use your hand, your right hand behind you to either pull your rib cage around more, or you can take that right hand to your sacrum, to the low spine, and reach your right elbow back behind you to open up that twist. Whatever you're doing with that right arm as you twist off to the right, I want you to sink your left hip down. So often that left hip will lift as we twist off to the right. Sink that left hip down and keep twisting to the right. And then coming back to center, you can switch which hand has the strap. Now we're twisting towards that bent knee, taking a few breaths here. And we want there to be a certain aspect of form in the legs and in the arms so that the side waists and the spine can not only lift, but lift with evenness from left to right. And if one hip is weighing heavier than the other, then you're going to get a little bit of a different stretch on one spine or one side of the spine in comparison to the other. So this is why we use the effort of the legs and the arms to activate the joints, the hip joints, the shoulder joints. so that we can tune in to that symmetry or maybe lack of symmetry. Now, some of you might be ready to hook that right elbow around the left thigh and twist a little bit deeper. But even if you're twisting, come to sit upright. Try not to hunker down against that left thigh, instead lifting up tall. Marichiyasana 3. And then unwinding back to center. Straighten the left leg. Now we're in Dandasana. Just like we practiced with the legs wide, same thing can happen here with the knees, where the knees drop to the floor. Maybe that muscle in the top of the knee isn't very active. So as you press the heels down, lift the knees up just slightly. Try and get that muscularity, squeezing and lifting the knee up the thigh. And then eventually we could start to straighten the legs, but we want to have that lift. We want to have that muscularity in the quadriceps, the top of the thigh, as we do that. Now take your strap around your left toe ball mounts. Bend your right knee towards you, or right heel towards you. And we're going to move into that open twist. So holding on to the strap with the right hand, twisting off to the left. Even though we're twisting to the left, we're weighing into that right hip, pressing into the heels, 4 points of the feet as we lift the chest up. As you roll the shoulders onto the back of your body, turn the rib cage, taking the right ribs forward, left ribs back. Right ribs forward, left ribs back. And then lift your chin, look over the left shoulder if you feel comfortable in the neck and shoulders today. Coming back to center. You can have the strap in your left hand, twisting off to the right. Some of you are ready to take that left arm, hook it to the outer thigh, closed twist, Marichiyasana 3. Fingers point straight up to the ceiling. The palm is relaxed and open. As you inhale and exhale, soften the face and the eyes. And look over the right shoulder. And then back to center. Each side just one more time. From Dandasana, left leg in, twisting off to the right. You can decide if you want to use your strap or if you simply want to use the resistance that your elbow touching the thigh creates as we twist. Marichiyasana 1, pressing the feet, feeling how the sit bones, the pits of the thighs are moving down to the floor as you lift the chest up and look over your right shoulder. And then coming back to center, twisting off to the left, closed twist, Marichiyasana 3, seated twist named after a sage. Pressing evenly into the feet. Still those inner thighs are turning in towards each other as you sit up nice and tall. And look over your left shoulder. And then back to center. Last side, last time, straightening the leg. Right leg comes in. Open twist, so twisting towards the straight leg, Marichiyasana 1, twisting to the left. Go over the left shoulder. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, feel how the rib cage expands and contracts. Let go of any tension in the face that might have risen. Moving through center, Marichiyasana 3, closed twist, off to the right. The legs stay the same. And look over the right shoulder. And then back to center, straightening the legs and bending forward. Paschimottanasana. This is intense stretch of the west And in Ayurvedic medicine, west is the back of the body. So this is really the intense stretch of the back of the body. You can start with your hands alongside the calves, lifting the chest up tall. So even though we're bending forward, we're not dropping the chest to the thighs. Even though we're bending forward, the chest is still lifting up to the ceiling. And so the depth that you move forward and bend forward comes all from the hips, has to be from the hips. So it might not be very much today, but that's okay. You can then grab your strap, place it around your toe ball mounts, have the arms straight here. And so as you pull on the ends of the strap, draw the shoulders back. Notice how the front of the armpit starts to open. The front of the armpit starts to lift up. Now some of you are ready to move to your maximum. Bend the elbows out to the sides and let the head hang. As you lengthen your inhale and exhale, notice what tension might be held in the back of the body. Can allow the spine to round slightly, but do keep the shoulders away from the ears. And then coming back up to sit. Now we're going to move into a supported back bend. So Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. You can come into Baddha Konasana, cross the legs, shift off your support. And this is where we're going to need that bolster or the stack of blankets. And you'll also want a strap and some blocks. You can use the wall to place the blocks against as well, but I'm going to demonstrate as if not using the wall. So I have the blocks on the medium height. They're at the end of my mat. I'm going to place a loop in my strap, and this loop is going to be used around the thighs. I'm going to demonstrate, and so you'll kind of know where we're headed. I think we've practiced, I'm not sure if it was in the Saturday class or if it was Wednesday's class, if we've practiced Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, it's bridge pose. If you don't have these props, then you can do it with just one block. And the block goes under the tailbone, and the chest is essentially in a shoulder stand and back bend position with tops of the shoulders on the floor. But I'd like to practice a more restorative version of that today. That's where the extra props kind of come in hand and are very nice to have. So I have a bolster to help create that lift off the floor for me. And sometimes I even like to add some extra lift. So what I've done is I have the blankets in shelf fold, kind of like you would grab a towel. I'm going to unfold it once and then fold it lengthwise. So I get this longer, thin blanket. Now I can fold and stack a couple of those blankets in that style, and I get a similar height to this bolster. Ideally, we're looking to have it as tall as the blocks, maybe even a little bit higher. And then I'll place it on the other end of my mat. If you're using, or if you have an extra blanket, you can unfold it and place it on the floor. It's not necessary. It's just extra support, extra softness. So I'll demonstrate, and then you'll see where we're headed, and you might be able to improvise from there. Strap is not necessary, but it is quite nice to help relax. So I'm starting sitting on one end of my bolster and blanket stack. I'm going to strap my thighs together. I really want the very middle of my thigh to be strapped. And as you do this, we want the strap tight enough so that it holds the legs together, but we don't want it so tight that there's any restriction of circulation. So we want it to just be nicely caressing our legs so the legs don't have to work as much. I have to tie my strap in order for it to hold me. That's what I was doing. Now I'm keeping my feet flat on the floor as I lay back. And as I lay back, I'm going to adjust my hair because I want to curl my chest over this edge of the bolster, and I'll feel the edge of the bolster in my upper back right underneath the armpits. So right in line with the bottom tips of the shoulder blades. Your tops of the shoulders may or may not touch the floor. That's not usually what we use as a measurement. Instead, we want to tune into the back of the body and feel that the shoulder blades, the bottom of the shoulder blades, is being supported and pushed up and in to the body by the bolster or blanket stack. The head is resting, and this is where we get that nice openness in the sides of the chest and the armpits. And then I'm straightening my legs and have my heels supported here. Now, the more support you have, the easier it is to let go. And the easier it is to just surrender into the props and really use this pose for restoration and just for a meditation prep. So there's not very much effort, very balancing. And then to come out, I bend my knees, feet flat to the floor. You can roll off to the side, or if you have tension in your back or pain in the back, you're gonna push yourself off the bolster and the blankets. And you're gonna start to bring your spine flat to the floor. And then we'll roll off to the side. So kind of depends on your spine, your body, what's best for you. But now you know kind of where we're headed. If you don't have these props and you're just using a block, I can demonstrate how it would come into that as well. If you know you have enough props, then you can start setting up your props for that. If you're just using a block or you want it to be a little bit more active, then you just have one block laying flat on the floor, tucking the shoulders underneath you, lifting the hips up. Now you can have the block on the low, medium, or high setting. I'll practice with the medium today. And I have the block underneath my tailbone, and then I'm straightening my legs. Now this does require a little bit more effort to press the upper arms down, lift the back ribs up off the floor. And you have to be mindful of how much you relax the legs. Sometimes we can get some achiness in the low back if we just let the legs splay to the sides. So you might need to maintain a little bit of resistance with the heels pressing down. You could probably strap your thighs here in this position as well, which would help reduce any achiness in the low back from letting the feet go. And then to come out, bring the feet in, lift the hips up, and rest the hips on the floor so the spine is flat. So those are the two variations of Setu Bandha Sarvangasana today. You can decide which one is best for you, which one you have the support to practice. Then we'll go ahead and get set up in that. So if you're using the deluxe Setu Bandha with more props, you can have your stack of blankets and a bolster, have your blocks, have your strap. Main key points is that before you lay back, we're strapping the legs. Feet are flat on the floor. And then even when you've strapped the legs, we're keeping the feet flat on the floor as we lean back and as we lay back. You're gonna start with your head off the support, shoulders on the support, and then you're gonna centimeter by centimeter start to slide off your props until the bottom tips of your shoulder blades are being lifted by the edge of the blanket stack or the bolster. So you're gonna feel this back bend. It almost feels like your shoulders are curling over the edge of your support. Now, if you're using a block, lifting the hips up, make sure to tuck your shoulders underneath you more and more and more. We really want the tops of the shoulders to be lined up with the floor. We want the tops of our shoulders and the back of the arm to be taking the weight and creating the support rather than the upper back or the neck. Then, once your shoulders are set, when your hips are supported, you can go ahead and straighten the legs. Either bringing your heels to some blocks, or if you're using the floor, just straightening the legs, but keep the feet flexed. If you are not using blocks underneath your feet, really focus on keeping the toes pointing up towards the ceiling for today. So we're keeping the back of the legs long, helps keep that turn of your inner thigh down to the floor. You have some options with how you would place the hands. You can either place them along the sides of the body. If you're using the block, this helps muscularize the upper back a little bit more. Or you can put the arms in this goalpost style position. So the elbows are out to the sides in line with the shoulders, and then the wrists are in line with the elbows. So you have a 90-degree angle at your elbow. It's like a goalpost, cactus. They also call it a hold 'em up stance. As you take a few breaths here, start to let go of any tension in the face and the eyes. Gently lengthen your inhale and exhale. As you take a nice deep breath in, deep breath out. Use that deep breathing through your nose to create some awareness in your lungs, to really tune your ears to the sound of your breath, to the sound of your body. And then you can allow your breath to come to its own natural rhythm, learning to observe the body, observe the breath as it is, without trying to manipulate, without trying to judge it. Sometimes our discernment starts to learn right and wrong. And we tell ourselves, oh, that's right, that's wrong. And there are certain things that we want to hold as form in the body to create length and openness so that we can breathe with more ease, so that we can physically feel more at ease. And as we move into these more restorative spaces, we can really let go of that concept of right and wrong. We want to learn to support ourselves so that we can just let go, so that we can just allow what is to simply be. And then to start to come out of Setu Bandha, form a bridge pose. If you have the block underneath you, you'll bring the feet in, lift the hips up, remove the block, rest the spine flat on the floor. If you're on a blanket stack, then you'll bend your knees, feet flat to the floor, and start to press your body towards the head side. So coming off the floor by shifting your feet, spine will come flat to the floor. And then if you're laying on the floor and you were using a block, just lay down flat for Shavasana. For those using the support under the body, you can turn your support sideways, bring it under the knees, and let go of everything everywhere. So minimal movements for Shavasana. Just a quick transition to lying flat on the floor, letting go of everything, everywhere. You're welcome to stay in Shavasana as long as you would like. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, let go of any subconscious tension that might have risen in the face or the body. You'll slowly place your hands on your abdomen, on your belly. Take a moment to appreciate your body for all that it's done and all that it will do. Appreciate your mind for taking the time to practice and harmonize with your body today. Acknowledge your heart, that organ in the center of your chest that's dedicated to life. You can move slowly to come up. Start by bending the knees, taking your right arm up and overhead, and as you roll to your right side, rest your head on your upper arm for a few breaths. And whenever you're ready, you can push yourself up to a comfortable seated posture. Feel free to use the props around you to sit comfortably. I appreciate you all for taking the time to practice yoga today. Thank you for joining me. Namaste. Well, thank you all for being here. Feel free to reach out to me either in the comments or privately if you have any questions pop up or things that you'd like me to consider. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend. And thanks again for joining me.